Good evening. Everything continues to go well tonight aboard Apollo 7. It's the fourth day in orbit for the three astronauts. Today's highlight was a live television broadcast from space. ABC science editor Jules Bergman reports.
The highest flying show in television history. As Mission Control gave the go-ahead, the Apollo 7 astronauts turned on their tiny TV camera 140 miles over the Earth. A smiling Don Isley held up a gag sign reading, "Hello from the lovely Apollo room, high above everything." Now let's hear the exchange with Mission Control.
Looks good. I can see Wally Hamlet now, and Don has a smile on his face, and there's Walt. We'll have Cecil B. Stafford down here directing. You forgot to shave this morning, Isley. Lost my razor. Yeah, some of the reproductions here are real good. I can look out through Wally's rendezvous window, and I can see the coas up there, the Orbrake ball. Right down the Gulf Coast. Okay, what's the next one? A little closer, Wally. Says keep those cards coming. Keep those cards and letters coming in, folks. It's loud and clear. Would I take a roll out the window of the TV camera? I can give you New Orleans right here. Okay, let's take a look and see how New Orleans.
Flight controllers and the astronauts' families in Mission Control were surprised by the quality of the pictures. Holding the camera against their hatch window, clouds over Louisiana were glimpsed by Schirra, Isley, and Cunningham. The coastline of Florida from 130 miles high. The pictures lasted 7 minutes, then Apollo 7 orbited out over the Atlantic. More live television from Apollo 7 is due tomorrow. During the afternoon, the Apollo 7 trio fired up their big spacecraft engine, lowering their orbit 35 miles. A precautionary move so smaller thruster rockets can get them out of orbit in case the big engine, whose performance has been flawless, fails to function when it's time to re-enter. Earlier, during the night, the power failed on Apollo 7 and red warning lights flashed on. An electrical overload due to a too sensitive warning device had tripped a circuit breaker off. No major problem, except if the circuit breaker hadn't been pressed back on quickly, the overload might have damaged inverters and forced an early end to the flight. But Walt Cunningham swiftly diagnosed the problem, tripped the circuit breakers back on, and may have saved the mission. It proved the value of having men aboard, or as Wally Schirra declares, there are many decisions a black box cannot make. And so tonight Apollo 7 orbits on, halfway through its fourth day in space, and from all signs the flight may well go the full 11 days. This is Jules Bergman reporting.
In a moment, today's Vietnam action and an exclusive report by John Scully on a possible lull in the fighting.
This is a report of a new advanced fluoride toothpaste, new Colgate with MFP. It documents the effectiveness of the MFP formula in reducing new cavities. One of the mothers who read a summary of this Colgate report is Mrs. Carolyn DeClerc.
Yes, I did, and it convinced me that new Colgate with MFP is an advanced fluoride toothpaste. Clinical test results showed that it was superior to the best-known stannous fluoride in reducing new cavities.
Ask your dentist about new Colgate with MFP.
Baggies, schmaggies, they're no better than my sandwich bag. Oh, no. Run some water. I'll prove baggies feel tighter with Twister Seal. But, Helen, here's my sandwich in baggies and yours in the other kind. Oh, don't them both.
Watch. Baggies feel tight, but your bag leaks.
My sandwich is still fresh.
Now, what do you say?
Okay, you proved baggies with Twister Seals are better. But did you have to ruin my sandwich?
Communist gunners used Soviet-made rockets today in a daylight shelling of Quang Ngai City and a nearby South Vietnamese army post about 350 miles north of Saigon. 4 soldiers and 4 civilians were killed, and 23 others were wounded in the attack. In Paris, Le Duc Tho, a special advisor to the North Vietnamese delegation, is returning to Hanoi tonight, and there is therefore speculation that Hanoi may be considering a new move to break the deadlock at the negotiations. ABC diplomatic correspondent John Scully in Washington points out other signs of a possible shift in communist strategy.
Despite today's rocket attack against Quang Ngai, administration leaders have detected a new and rather mysterious lull in most enemy activities in Vietnam. And they're wondering whether it's North Vietnam's long-awaited move to de-escalate the war. President Johnson may fly to Honolulu soon to discuss this and other developments with American military and diplomatic chiefs from Vietnam. The sudden fall-off in most enemy attacks resembles a similar period last August when some officials urged Mr. Johnson to interpret it as enough reason to stop the bombing. The current lull has lasted 2 weeks, and again, some authorities would like to see Mr. Johnson seize on it as evidence that Hanoi has started to reduce its end of the war. What is intriguing about the newest development is that it's accompanied by some withdrawal of enemy forces from advanced positions along the demilitarized zone. In the past, Mr. Johnson has given as a reason for continuing the bombing a desire to protect American forces in that area. There are also signs that enemy infiltration has fallen off drastically in the past few weeks, and that enemy-initiated attacks have dropped well below the 1967 level. There could be military explanations for all of this, namely that the enemy has been hurt so badly he's resting and regrouping. But no one is ruling out a possible political significance, particularly since North Vietnam's negotiator in Paris said tersely last week, President Johnson still has the time and the power to end the war during his remaining months in office. This is John Skelly, ABC News, Washington.
General Curtis LeMay, the vice presidential candidate on George Wallace's ticket, leaves for Vietnam tomorrow on a fact-finding mission. Today, General LeMay told the Women's National Press Club in Washington that the public knows better than to believe what he called a scare tactic, describing him as a big bomber general with a thunderbolt in one hand and a nuclear warhead in the other. LeMay then talked about why we have not won a military victory.
The only reason we haven't had a victory in Vietnam is because we've done everything humanly possible to avoid it. The only reason American soldiers are bleeding and dying in Vietnam today is because our leaders have tied their hands behind their backs. And it's about time the American people blew the whistle on this whole incredible operation. The way to win in Vietnam is not by fighting man-to-man in the jungles in the south, but by destroying in the north the enemy's capacity to wage war. That's elementary.
In Washington today, Vice President Humphrey challenged Richard Nixon to join with him in a pledge not to bargain with George Wallace for electoral college votes if no candidate should win a majority. I am not bidding, Mr. Humphrey said. I call on Mr. Nixon to pledge the same. In Key Biscayne, Florida, Mr. Nixon said the Democratic administration was unwilling or unable to give Latin America the help it needs. Nixon called for new emphasis on trade instead of aid. George Wallace campaigned today in California. The 90th Congress of the United States finally adjourned this afternoon after one final bit of business in the House. There, Representative John Ashbrook of Ohio managed to kill a bill that would have established a parking authority for the District of Columbia. He did so by blocking the unanimous consent required in the absence of a quorum. What kind of a Congress was the 90th? An appraisal now by ABC's Howard K. Smith.
Washington newspaper calls the session of Congress that ended today a surprisingly productive one. Our most widely circulated Washington columnist says its record has been so bad that all its members ought to be defeated for re-election. Both of those judgments happen to be right. Compared to what people feared this Congress might do, it did all right. Compared to the nation's problems it ought to meet, it didn't do well at all. Its main achievement was due to panic. When Martin Luther King was killed, it hastened to pass a very good civil rights bill and then passed a first-class housing bill. But for the rest, it gutted the foreign aid bill, it failed to act on a very good bill to get jobs for the hardcore unemployed, it passed a feeble gun control bill, and it failed to ratify the pact to keep irresponsible little nations from getting nuclear weapons. So the 90th now joins the long list of inadequate Congresses, a much longer list in the present century than that of adequate ones. The fact that Congress so often does a poor job is not accidental, it is built in. The costs of running for Congress are soaring, but a candidate's income is not. Candidates are dependent for campaign funds on rich private interests who have more money to offer with each year of prosperity. However, in return, the rich interest, the National Rifle Association, for example, demands that the candidate once elected vote its way. in this case against a good gun control bill. Else, next election, the interest money will go to that congressman's opponent. President Kennedy and President Johnson have both begged Congress to liberate itself, to pass laws for federal payment of election costs. Someday, Congress is bound to do that, and the Declaration of Independence will at last have reached Capitol Hill. This is Howard K. Smith in Washington.
In a moment, a report from Oregon, where veteran Senator Wayne Morse is fighting for re-election.
You're suddenly shapelier. You're suddenly shapelier. You're suddenly shapelier in a Playtex Cross Your Heart bra. Its secret? This Playtex shaping crosses your heart with stretch to lift and separate. You're suddenly shapelier in a Playtex Cross Your Heart bra. You'll see. Get one and pass the word. You're suddenly shapelier. You're suddenly shapelier.
Announcing a comfortable way to look 5 pounds thinner. The new 5 pounds thinner girdle by Playtex. Prove it yourself. Fingertips so. Press in. See? The new Playtex girdle has fingertip panels to hold you in firmly. Yet it's so different. Feels like nothing you've ever felt before. Look 5 pounds thinner without losing a pound.
Also from Playtex, Golden Girdles, now on sale. Save $2.
President Johnson once described Senator Wayne Morse of Oregon as a man who has never been afraid to say what he thinks. Elected to the Senate first as a Republican 24 years ago, Morse decided in 1955 that he wanted to be a Democrat, so he switched parties and went right on winning elections. Senator Morse was one of the first men in the Congress to oppose the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. He was one of 2 senators who voted against the Tonkin Gulf Resolution in 1964. Now, Senator Morse is facing a determined threat from a young Republican in this election year. For a closer look at the Senate race in Oregon, here is ABC's Jim Burns.
The state of Oregon is famous throughout the nation for the rugged, primitive beauty of its Pacific coastline, for the grandeur of its towering forests, and for the determined independence of its highly literate voters.
Come on, Mama.
In every senatorial election since 1944, Oregon's voters have sent fiery Wayne Morse to Washington under the banner of one party or another. But this year, the Democrats' most famous dub is trying for his 5th term, and many politicians here believe that he faces the most serious challenge of his long political life. Surveys show that 6 months ago, 90% of Oregon's electorate had never even heard of the man who challenges Morse, Republican Robert Packwood. But aided by a massive publicity campaign, Packwood's built a broad political base and now battles Morse with smooth self-assurance.
Hope it's clear again that I disagree with the policy in Vietnam. But I don't think President Johnson is an evil man. I don't think Dean Rusk has put us in Vietnam for the purpose of running this country into the ground. I believe they think we're supporting a representative government. I don't think so, but I think they do. And when Wayne Morse can make the statement that he made 6 weeks ago that our aid in Vietnam is identical to the Russian invasion of Czechoslovakia, to me that belies an ignorance of foreign affairs that's colossal.
Politically, 38-year-old Robert Packwood can be labeled as a Republican moderate who takes a somewhat dovish position on Vietnam. Packwood challenges Wayne Morse's Senate record as being ineffectual. He calls that record and what he terms the senator's sometimes extreme views the major issues of this campaign. Alert to the growing Republican threat, Morse's powerful organization, beefed up by a large influx of McCarthy youths, has pushed the senator's campaign into high gear. Morse himself has trimmed his Washington schedule to the limit and begun a series of whistle-stop forays around the state which will continue until the election. Despite his 68 years, the senator seems more than a match for his grueling, if picturesque, campaign schedule. Through his speeches and curbside chats, Morse hammers away at two major themes: his long experience in Washington and the fact that if reelected, he'll become chairman of the powerful Senate Committee on Labor and Public Welfare. Morse is convinced that voter attitudes toward national rather than local issues will determine the course of Oregon's elections, and he's certain that his Senate record will carry him to victory.
Senator, some pundits and political writers are saying that you're in trouble here in Oregon this year. Are you in trouble, sir?
I'm ready to go to a vote. I'm going to win on November 9th by a substantial majority. I've gone through these campaigns, since 1944. I know what the situation is, and I'm satisfied I'll be elected by a very good majority.
Well, you really are quite confident that things will go your way in November.
I think I know the people of Oregon, and the people of Oregon know my record. I'm satisfied they're not going to reject it.
Senator, one final question. There's those who say that here in Oregon, Senator Wayne Morse himself is the issue in this campaign. Do you consider that to be true? Is it you, the man, you, the personality, who are really the issue here?
Well, I'm always an issue. That's why I win.
Despite Morris's confidence, Bob Packwood's rapid climb to political prominence does pose a threat. If a Nixon landslide develops, Packwood just may pull off one of the upsets of the year. But more probably, Oregon's voters will again demonstrate their independence of national trends and send gentleman farmer Wayne Morse back to his seat in the Senate. This is Jim Burns, ABC News, Portland, Oregon.
In a moment, guest commentator Jimmy Breslin takes a look at New York's newest school strike.
This is a molecular model of poly 1,4-cyclohexylene dimethylene terephthalate. How about that? And I'm Joanna Barnes, here to tell you what this unique molecule of Codel polyester fiber means in carpets. It's so special, it's patented.
Every room in your house comes alive because carpets of Codel bounce back beautifully. Even a house full of kids can't keep Codel fiber down. That's why Codel is the fastest growing carpet fiber.
If you can't remember the name Codel, ask for poly 1,4-cyclohexylene dimethylene terephthalate.
We also make 2,2,4-trimethyl-1,3-pentane diol monoisobutyrate.
But that doesn't go in carpets.
Codel fiber has bounced back. Built-in.
Count on Codel, a member of the Eastman Kodak family.
For the third time since the opening of school, New York City schools are closed again. The teachers are on strike once more. The teachers' union dispute revolves around a local control or decentralization of only one school district in Brooklyn. Nevertheless, children all over the city are not attending classes. ABC guest commentator Jimmy Breslin takes a sharp look at the New York teacher strike and the innocent bystanders.
The trouble with the New York school strike is the consumers are children. So today, while adults with their egos and material wants thrashed around in a strike, over 1 million children lost a day of learning. Decentralization now is functioning only in one experimental district, in a part of Brooklyn where schools and life itself hasn't functioned properly in the last 15 years. Anything new would have to be better. The experimental schools were the only ones open in the city today. At one of them, I met an English teacher named Jeffrey Nielsen. He's 23. Last year, he taught at a prep school in Bethesda, Maryland. It had 63 acres of rolling ground and very well-bred students. Nielsen came to Brooklyn for the challenge of the decentralized school. He found a couple of shocking facts. One, black kids are not born dumb. Nielsen says their compositions are far more expressive than his old prep school students used to write. He also found that the blackboard jungle doesn't exist when a teacher relates to black kids and works with them. Boredom and distrust cause the trouble in classrooms. When this term began, Mr. Nielsen spotted 2 16-year-old boys in his class. He felt that if he didn't reach them this year, they would be gone. Both are bright, and both say they don't want to go on to high school. He's been working on them, playing basketball with them after school, trying to get at least 2 kids out of the world of the streets.
Last week, unions and school boards began clashing. The kids now walk to school past lines of police who wrap nightsticks against wooden barricades. It is a disturbing garrison atmosphere. In class today, Jeffrey Nielsen found one of his two 16-year-olds reading a form from a cheap employment agency. This is Jimmy Breslin.
Sirhan, the man accused of murdering Senator Robert F. Kennedy, appeared in court today at a hearing that postponed the beginning of his trial until December 9th. His attorney said they could not be ready for the previously scheduled date of November 1st. In his seventh court appearance, Sirhan spoke only one word. He said yes when he was asked if he agreed to the postponement. The Supreme Court today handed down a number of decisions ranging from federal gun laws to haircuts. The court denied a hearing to Robert Depew, a founder of the secret Minutemen, who was convicted of violating federal laws on the shipment of firearms. The court agreed to decide on a New York state law making it illegal to distribute anonymous campaign literature, and the court refused to hear the case of three young men from Dallas who were barred from their high school until they cut their long hair. In a moment, a report on today's events at the Olympic Games.
Yeah, I know. Now, we'll get the vote out. I'll get back to you. Hey, Ken, we need some action in the 14th precinct.
We sure do. But my staff is spread pretty thin already.
Yeah, well, I'll move the door-to-door campaign in there tomorrow morning. That ought to do it.
Right. Boy, this cigarette sure doesn't do it. Tastes rough.
Here, try mine.
Cool. In the long size now, huh?
Yeah.
Come up to the cool taste. Taste extra coolness in an extra length.
And you start first thing in the morning.
Hey, Bill. Got one show winner.
Huh?
This cool. Thanks.
Come up to the cool taste.
Try new Cool Filter Longs, the only extra-length cigarette with a taste of extra coolness. Cool Filter Longs, Cool Filter Kings. Two sizes, one taste. The cool taste.
The American Olympic team went after their first gold medals today. A report now on the U.S. team and on other events today in Mexico City.
This is Chris Schenkel reporting from the Nerve Center of ABC Sports' exclusive coverage of the most colorful and well-planned summer games in the history of the Olympics. Well, there was a lot of action today. Thus far in basketball, the United States showed its scoring punch by downing Senegal 93-36, while the United States women's volleyball team wasn't quite as successful because they lost their second match today to Czechoslovakia 3-1. Good news in women's track. Our three girls, Wyomia Tyus, Margaret Bales, and Barbara Farrell, advanced in the qualifying for the 100-meter dash. While in men's track, world champion Bob Segrin gave us a scare. In his first attempt, he fouled as a result of the pole falling forward into the pits instead of going back toward the ramp. But here he is on his second attempt. The bar set at 16 feet 1 inch. World champion Bob Segrin, who holds the record at 17 feet 9, has qualified for the finals in the men's pole vault. Well, the lesser countries have won all the medals thus far. In the 10,000 meters, Tamo of Kenya won that. And in the Bantam weightlifting, it was Narsiri of Iran who won the gold medal. But the powers, or the so-called powers, I'm sure sometime today will come to the front. And all of us at ABC Sports in Mexico City invite you to join us for two shows tonight. The first at 7 Eastern, 6 Central Time, live and in color from Mexico City. Chris Schenkel reporting.
The State Department said today that the United States does not condone any call to arms by ousted Panamanian President Arnulfo Arias. Arias is now in the U.S.-controlled Canal Zone. He's been warned not to engage in political activities while he's being given asylum. But over the weekend, Arias called upon his followers to take up arms against the military officers who threw him out. On the New York Stock Exchange today, Dow Jones Industrials were up a fraction. Nearly 12 million shares were traded. The New York Stock Exchange Index was up 11 cents. On the American Stock Exchange, more than 5 million shares were traded. The American Stock Exchange Index was up 6 cents. In a moment, General Eisenhower receives a 78th birthday salute.
It's dawn, and the battle is just about to begin. It's the battle every eye must fight every day of its life. It's the fight against eye pollution. Soot, ashes, dust, dirt, exhaust. They're in the air, and they get in your eye. Nature gave your eye the ability to clean itself. But this big load of impurities, this eye pollution, is too much for it to handle. It gets tired, irritated, uncomfortable, red. How do you win the battle against eye pollution? Use Murine. Murine cleans, soothes, comforts the eye. And unlike some things you put in your eye, you can use Murine every day, as often as you want to. Murine. It's the pure and simple solution to eye pollution.
Still scrubbing, huh? Just like a scrub woman.
Scrubbing's the only way to clean a bathroom.
Dow Bathroom Cleaner does away with scrubbing, lifts the dirt off, doesn't scratch, leaves no grit.
Oh, yeah?
Here, spray Dow on the tile. See how Dow foam digs under dirt and lifts dirt off like no scouring cleanser ever could. Dow lets you clean like a lady.
Yeah.
Why do you use wax paper? Now there's Handy Wrap at about the same price.
Freshness is a snap with Handy Wrap.
Look, cheese stored a week in wax paper, tough, dry. Cheese stored a week in Handy Wrap, tender, moist.
It keeps food fresher and tasting nice. And like wax paper, it's
Low in price. Why do you use wax paper? Now there's Handy Wrap.
freshness is a snap with Handy Wrap. Handy Wrap.
Former President Eisenhower celebrated his 78th birthday today at the Walter Reed Medical Center, where he is recuperating from the series of heart attacks he suffered this summer. ABC's Bill Downs reports from Washington.
Only 2 months ago, reporters were on a death watch here at Walter Reed Army Hospital, sadly preparing obituaries on Dwight David Eisenhower. Today, we returned with the Army Band and Chorus to serenade him a happy 78th birthday, acknowledged when Ike waved his 5-star flag. The former president's recovery from his 7th and most shattering heart attack was described by his physicians as miraculous. Mrs. Eisenhower and members of the family were on hand for a private birthday party in the General's Hospital suite, and doctors announced that he was allowed to take a few steps around his hospital room today for the first time since the August heart seizure. By proclamation of President Johnson, today begins National Eisenhower Week, to be shared by the entire country in honor of this most remarkable gentleman. This is Bill Downs, ABC News, Washington.
That's tonight's news and comment. I'm Frank Reynolds. Good night.
Monday through Friday in color. The ABC Evening News with Frank Reynolds. ABC will bring you highlights of tomorrow's live transmission in space from the Apollo 7 at approximately 10:45 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This has been a presentation of ABC News.